Hey everyone, welcome to the Restoration Podcast, a podcast of hope and healing. Listen as we hear real stories told by real people. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life. All right, well, hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I first and foremost want to thank y'all who have been listening and or watching so far. We really appreciate the feedback. We appreciate the support. I'm excited for today and looking forward to it, this episode, because we have a really special guest today. This lady here next to me is Miss Lisa Gilchrist, and she is a member of our church here at Morningside Assembly.
Yep.
For how long have you attended here?
This makes 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she's a member of our church, and the reason we asked her to come is because of what she does when she's not here at church. So can you tell us what it is you do for a living?
For my living, I am a licensed mental health counselor, and basically what that means is I get to kind of sit with people and dig through the tough weeds and sort through some of the different things that have kind of come up through their life. Some of it's current, some of it's recent, some of it's actually really far back.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, and so there's a lot we can tackle, and we'll do as much as we can here in this episode, and we may have you back if that's okay.
That would be all right. Like, assuming this goes well.
Yeah, it will. It'll be great. You're doing great. Okay, so before we dive into anything deep like that, I think people would probably want to get to know who you are.
Yeah.
Like how you got to be here in Sioux City. It's always interesting to learn people's history of how they got here. Sometimes it's like something I would have never thought of. Usually it's like a family thing, like, oh, I had a relative and they ended up here. Because Sioux City, Iowa is such a random place. Like,
it is.
No offense to Sioux City or Iowa, but that's not on my top 10 list when I was a child. I didn't say, I want to end up in Sioux City, Iowa, but here I am. The Lord's kind of funny. So where are you originally from, and like how'd you end up here in Sioux City?
I am originally from the East Coast. I hail from south of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I don't have an accent.
Yeah.
So, but I can go anywhere and make it work. There's a few words that
it comes out.
Yeah.
Like which words? Is that really how you say it?
Depending on my mood.
What other words?
Harvard. It just calendar. It's just kind of weird.
That's one of the most.
And it surprises
that's one of the
me
more
every
interesting.
time. Like, I have to check the calendar.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting accents. But anyway, so you grew up on the East Coast.
I did for 18 years. I've done some traveling. Maybe at some point we can go back to some of that. So that's been kind of exploratory. But what shifted me into more of what I do now is I moved from New York to Columbus, Ohio, and I was there for 7 years, and for several of those years, had a chance to kind of be in a military base, like childcare. So little people, and I just saw some really hard things, and God prompted me like, hey, you can do a little bit more one-on-one. That's more of your introvert style. Yeah. You need to sit with people. You don't have to run around and go crazy. And I just remember seeing a lot of pain in these little kids' lives. And maybe we can go back to that at some point, but it really, really prompted me. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so after that year of doing that, I was like, okay, I got to be done. Shifted some jobs, and I was like, I'm going to get my master's in professional counseling.
Oh, well.
So I did it, booked it out in 3 years, and then I was a counselor there for almost 2 years.
In Ohio?
In Columbus, Ohio. And something happened with my job. We kind of went back to contractor. I had been an employee, and they just kind of were like, yeah, we can't do that right now. And so the timing of it is really interesting, and how I found all this, because I'd been doing all of that, getting my master's, everything prepared. And the clinic I work at had been praying for multiple years, hoping, like, who's coming. And at that time that we transitioned out of being employee to back to a contractor, I said, I got to be done. I'm an adventure girl. I got to figure this out. Yeah. And so I looked up, on Indeed.com.
Sure.
And I'd been getting emails every day. Every day. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really need to be a worship pastor, but okay.
Yeah.
And then I realized I was not going to be working there anymore. I went on purpose, and the only job I found was at this clinic called Renewing the Mind. And it was like there was a yellow highlighter on it, and it was the only job because everything else was nursing. I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. Like, I'm a counselor. I deal with trauma. More up here and like right here, not like a doctor.
Yep.
And so long story short, like I apply. I have an ancient dinosaur computer that I forget doesn't email appropriately. And so I was trying to go back and forth, but I'm not hearing back. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to actually send this through my email. This isn't working. So there was some confusion there, but I was like, no, this is like, I don't know what this is, but I got to come out. So I actually came out and interviewed November of that year, and I was out here by February of the following year, 2020.
Quick turnaround there,
and then COVID hit.
Oh, 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe it's not maybe, for sure it was a God thing, a divine timing thing that
Super.
You found it then, because if it was delayed even a few months, I don't know who knows what would have happened.
I would have been out of job, probably.
During the pandemic.
Yeah.
I can imagine, and again, we may dive into this, but I can imagine that at that time, the pandemic probably triggered a lot of people's stuff,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I wanted to also quickly, and that's amazing. I never knew that about you, that you're from the East Coast. So, Lisa attends our church, and our church isn't the biggest church. We're not the smallest church either. The way I describe Morningside, and back me up on this, is when people ask like, what's the size of the church, I always like to describe it as it's a small church with a bigger feel.
Yeah.
Or it's a big church with a smaller feel. We're kind of in between. And the reason I say that is because Lisa's been here for 4 years. I've been here for 3, but we just very recently got connected.
Yeah.
And so we're not like huge that people are just a number, but we're big enough that there's people that, not everyone knows every single person or everyone's name. And so we recently got connected. But the reason I bring that up is you are part of a ministry here at our church that is very new.
Yeah.
We just started it this year. And I wanted you to tell people about this, but I also wanted to ask about this as well. So we have a bilingual service every Sunday at 11:30, and we started that Christmas Eve. And not to bleed onto your story, but the Lord kind of gave me this idea last year in the fall. Just kind of random. I grew up in a Hispanic church, in a Hispanic household, and so I have all this knowledge of that Hispanic church world. And so I brought it up to our staff. I said, hey, what if we started a bilingual service?
Okay.
And they were on board. And I wasn't sure. I was kind of hesitant to bring it up because I don't know. It's not, the majority of our staff is not, knowledgeable in that world.
I know the feeling.
You know what I mean?
I know the feeling.
And so, anyway, so long story short on that as well is they agreed. And so we started that. And there's a reason I'm saying this with Lisa here. Okay. We needed interpreters because the way we do service is we do bilingual worship, bilingual prayer time, bilingual scripture reading. And then when it comes time to the message, Pastor Johnny, our senior pastor, does not speak Spanish.
Right.
And so we decided to go the route of using translation earpieces. Very common. A lot of churches do that. My church did that growing up. I don't know if I ever told you that. But we decided to go that route. And so because of that, we needed interpreters. And so I grew up in a Hispanic household. Okay, both my parents are bilingual. A lot of my family is bilingual. My 2 grandmothers don't even speak English.
Right.
Okay, and a lot of people close to me at my church know English. My Spanish is somewhat limited. And so when we first brought this idea of a bilingual service up, they were like, okay, well, who's going to interpret? You, right? And I'm like, I can be one of the interpreters. And so I was a little panicked, to be honest.
A little freeze came online.
I was a little panicked at first because I'm like, oh no, am I going to have to do it every week? And so I was like, Lord, I started praying. I'm like, Lord, provide people. And so coming back to why I'm bringing this up is another congregation member brought you up to me on a Sunday, I remember, and she said, hey, this is Lisa.
I do remember this interaction.
She goes, this is Lisa, and she's fluent in Spanish. She's bilingual. And I was like, whoa, like the Lord's like timing is so perfect. And so Lisa is actually one of our interpreters for that bilingual service.
Yes.
And so about once a month or so, she's in the back, and while Pastor Johnny's preaching in English on the platform, she's interpreting so that our Spanish speakers can understand. So sorry, I didn't mean to take that long with that, but the reason
it's a little bit different.
Yeah,
It's a little bit outside of
you wouldn't expect that, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, how in the world did you learn? When did you learn Spanish, and why did you learn Spanish? Because when she brought you up to me, I'm like, really? And then it was true.
That's totally fair.
You know? So how did that come about?
It's a small part of a bigger story. I remember back to being in kindergarten and wanting to go to Spain, and I can speed that story up and say I've been 3 times
Cool.
till this point. Did some ESL work,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But I knew when I was 5, I was like, I don't know what this is, but
You
I've
just
got
had this
it.
passion for
Yeah.
Spanish.
And I didn't
That's
even know how to
amazing.
speak any of it. I didn't start until 6th grade because
Yep.
anyway, I went into a public system.
Sure.
I was in a faith-based Baptist school
Yeah.
growing up. And then in 6th grade, I went in and they're like, here's your language. And I was like, well, French, maybe. We don't really have German. I don't know what else to do. So like Spanish, like that's my jam. And I know people have told me like your eyes light up when you talk about
It does.
Spanish.
I remember
and
that
it's
too.
like super exciting,
Yep.
but there's also this simultaneous like panic fear, like, oh no,
Yep.
what did I just commit
Yeah.
to?
Yeah.
But I have to keep reminding myself, like, I love this.
Yep.
Made for this, built for this. This is dreams.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how big or small, being utilized in the kingdom and
Yeah.
knowing there's
Amen,
a
yeah.
place
Yeah.
for me, and there's maybe multiple places, and how to operate in that, and knowing that myself, I'm not the biggest volunteerer. I want to show up, I want to be, but I'm also kind of like,
Yeah, not to
This
put you
is-
on the spot on that,
Yeah.
but I remember when this lady brought you to me, said, "Hey, she wants to serve," and I think the first thing I suggested was either the choir, right? For some
so.
reason, why did I say that?
I
And
do
then
sing, but
yeah, maybe that's why. And then the other one was, we need people up front, greeters and stuff like that. And again, not to put you on the spot, but you were like, that's not really what I do. I'm a little more, as you said earlier, a little more introverted.
yes.
And so then I was like, this is literally perfect.
Yeah.
I said, interpreting is what we need. She's bilingual. She's passionate, obviously. And this is something that you wouldn't be on the spot for. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which I understand that as well. A lot of people have a really big fear of speaking in public. And whenever when you're on the spot, like someone speaking English and then you're expected to turn it around, that's a lot of pressure. Okay.
It
And
is.
so, anyway, it literally worked out perfectly that you were able to do this. You checked all the boxes, and it's been a really big blessing. And I like how you worded it, how you said, even if it's just a little bit, it's for the kingdom. I mean, amen to that. Like, there may be people listening that may feel the same way, that they have certain abilities, but maybe they feel that they're insignificant. It's not insignificant. Just surrender it,
Right.
you know, and see what the Lord does with it.
Yeah.
So,
And I have discovered throughout my life, and I don't want to go too far, but
Sure.
that when I triggered by surrender, and I have often discovered throughout my life, when I surrender, there's rescue.
yeah.
And that's been a really cool pattern to be
Yeah.
more mindful of
Mm-hmm.
as I've grown in my understanding of what it means
Yep.
to show up, to be present, even if you're overwhelmed,
Yep.
even if you're not sure what's happening right now, and to actually be a part of it. And this might also even lean into some of what we're talking to.
Sure.
So I want to finish, like, I've just loved Spanish
Yeah.
forever. I've actually had an opportunity to live in the Dominican Republic for a year. I spent a summer in Nicaragua, which is something that we've been able to connect on.
I remember that. My dad's family's from Nicaragua.
Best
so
summer of
that's
my
amazing.
life. Gang leaders leading us up mountains, serving the Lord, and just
That's amazing.
it was really powerful.
It was all, ordained for the Lord to prepare you for this current season, which is pretty amazing to think
It
about.
is. Because you begin to wonder, like, what is this for?
Exactly.
Why do I have this? And then
Exactly.
even hearing, like, Matt, Pastor Matt speak about talents, like,
Yep.
I've got stuff, but how do I
How do I utilize this for
implement
the
it?
kingdom?
How do I
Yeah.
let them know
Yeah.
I can do this?
Yeah.
It is surprising. I've got
Yeah.
blonde hair and blue eyes, but I love it.
That's so great. It's amazing. It's such a great, encouraging testimony. Is that that gift of yours that the Lord is using to further fulfill the kingdom, which is so amazing. You know, we serve a creative God, and if you need proof of that, just watch a sunrise or a sunset, you know. And
Every
so
time.
when he,
Every time.
which by the, just random, that's always an emotional experience for me, is watching the sunset.
It is.
Every morning. It never gets old to me. And I've mentioned that before on a previous podcast. But that same creative God, if he can be that creative with, you know, things in the universe, things he's created, science, he's that creative when it comes to our calling and our giftings as well. You know, that weird, strange passion you have for a random language, the Lord will use it, you know? So...
And it's irrevocable, so we
Yep.
got to use it while
Yeah,
we
that was
have
a
it.
great, very, very great and
Yeah.
convicting scripture he used on that. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. But we have you here today because I wanted to learn more about the world that you work with. And it's we had an earlier episode with my wife Tori, who has anxiety, and she was very open and shared her testimony with that. And we had mentioned that these topics that deal with mental health are kind of hot topics today.
For sure.
And it wasn't that way about 10 years ago, am I correct? It wasn't as out there and as talked about.
In many ways, I think it was surfacing,
Yeah.
but it came from such depths
Yep.
to open up and
Yeah.
kind of blossom in
Well,
a way
yeah,
that
let me reword that. It's more like more and more people have an understanding of these things, is what I'm saying.
I think they were forced to,
know
which
what I
goes
mean?
back to some of the COVID stuff
Yeah.
of like how we have gone through the grind.
Yeah.
We talk about autopilot a lot,
Yeah.
functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of my world
Yep.
is to understand how we function if we're not there.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit, but I don't want to go into my full journey, but there was a part of understanding that when I shifted from being in a freeze, which I can explain a little bit later, of just being overwhelmed, kind of wanting to hide, shame kind of likes to live there, guilt likes to show
Yeah.
up, and you just feel so small.
Yeah.
And coming out of that,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh my gosh, are you a threat?
Yeah.
Oh boy, like now I have to
Yeah.
get really tight, and I'm sure, and everything slowed down, everything shut
Mm-hmm.
down. And so it kind of forced people to come out of the woodwork. But when I realized coming out of, like, I was 16, I had a car accident,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in therapy, I'm actually saying the words, I'm alive.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it opened up this whole, I haven't been living. I'm alive, but I
Yeah.
haven't been living. And now I have to grieve my life unlived.
Mm.
And it's been a really interesting
Mm-hmm.
and winding and fun and
Yeah.
sorrowful and confusing journey
Yeah.
of walking through grief. And there's many, many, many different kinds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think equipping people with those tools, offering the awareness of the heaviness
Mm-hmm.
that comes when you grieve something,
Mm-hmm.
when something didn't go the way that you thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
Missed appointments, right? A lot of people say disappointments
Yeah.
are missed appointments.
Yeah.
And I think we experience those chronically
Yeah.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how to show up in that and learning how to support that. And
Yeah.
so in my day-to-day, I get really, really awesome opportunities to just hold
Mm-hmm.
and support. There's talking, of course, but there's a lot of just holding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most people don't, I mean, to ask someone, like, when was the last time you were
Yeah.
just held to be
Yeah.
held? And it can be really emotional.
Yeah, that's a heavy question, and
Yeah.
I can guess that there's a lot of, like you said, emotional moments with your job. I don't think most people understand the effects of heavy emotions on the human mind or body.
I
Am I
would
correct?
agree with you.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. I didn't either until I took this job. Okay. I don't do what
I
you do.
get it.
Okay.
I get it.
do maybe an ounce of what you do.
Yeah.
But as pastors, we're also entrusted with the care of our people.
As shepherds. Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes, whether it's a volunteer or just church members, they seek counsel. And so I remember I was a teacher before here. And I remember, I think it was Pastor Johnny that was telling me, are you ready for this? We're excited. And he said, just be prepared. Because a teacher is on their feet 8 hours a day, which is a lot physically. You get home, you're drained. Okay. We're not exactly as active as pastors, and so I don't really get physically drained. But what I will say, what I learned really fast is I get very emotionally and spiritually drained, and I didn't know that was a thing until I got this job. Yeah. When you have people that are under your care and they share their needs with you, and you're trying to counsel them and seeking guidance of how to counsel them, what to say. And again, I'm not trying to say like I completely understand. Yeah. But it seems like a similar thing. And like I said, I don't think the general public, I think most people don't understand the amount of toll that emotions can have on the body and the brain. And that's kind of what you do, correct? Is you work with people who need help transitioning through that, correct? Things like that.
Oftentimes we're unaware. I mean, I think of even going to Target and like, it's always been funny to me. 'Cause I'm like, I can move across the country, no problem. Get all my stuff, pack up, move to Sioux City, Iowa. This is great. Don't ask me to just go to Target on a Saturday morning. I get overwhelmed. I take in everything. And I watch how other people do it, but it makes me, I don't know, it's not jealous, but it's just wonder, like, how do you do that? Are you connected? What would Target look like? Or what would, I was going to say Kroger, but we don't have a Kroger,
we don't have Kroger here.
Hy-Vee. My mind blanked. What would that look like if we were all embodied and connected instead of just doing things? So like beginning to notice when your face gets hot because you're embarrassed or you're getting irritated, or noticing like this is a lot. Like I'll just help people notice, like, how is that supportive to you? It's not meant to overwhelm you. How does your body manage and contain your whole life experiences and the experiences of others? And how do you put that in interaction with two different nervous systems?
Yeah,
so
it's
very
a lot.
integral.
Yeah. And I like what you said, that it's just kind of bringing awareness to those people of what's going on. That's amazing.
I would just say, like, to add to that, there's an underlying sense of, like, I'm looking for a sense of safety. Like, I need to feel that sense of safety myself. You can't tell me that you're safe and I'll believe you. But when I walk into that and felt sense of, like, this is okay. I can share that. That I'm good. Like, but at the moment the nervous system detects threat, it can get mad, it can run away, and it can hide. And then it can people please. And just to make it stop.
Yeah. I didn't think about that.
That's like the fourth
really?
dimension.
People please? That's interesting.
Just so it will stop. Just get me out of here.
I can see how that's, like an endless cycle for people. Yeah.
And it's draining. So kind of like you're saying, it takes a toll.
Yeah.
And so usually when they come into my office, it's like, we've had all four.
Oh,
we don't know which one we're in.
Yeah.
And we gotta build safety first before we do any work.
Yeah. That is definitely a ministry. I mean, talk about...
It is a calling.
Yeah. It's a calling for sure. But talk about, our church likes to say that we're a place of hope and healing. Definitely what you do is also spreading hope and healing, which I want to remind you people that, I know we say that our church is a place of hope and healing, but remember that the church isn't just the four walls. We are the church. Yeah. And so Lisa doing what she does every day is definitely...
By extension.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's amazing. And then correct me if I'm wrong, the place you work at is it a Christian counseling place, correct? Okay, so that's amazing. So how would... I don't know how to ask this question, but it's I would word it this way. So it's not that you force the Bible down people's throats, correct?
No.
Okay. Can you kind of explain a little bit what makes y'all unique compared to just a random counseling center I see down the road? What makes y'all different?
The easiest thing I think I can speak to that is knowing that I carry Jesus everywhere I go.
Yep.
And I've walked with people who've explored a lot of different faiths, and I hold space for that as well, always with the hope that the body knows what it needs to do to get to its healing. I'm just here to facilitate and support that. Yeah. People still have choices. People still, it's a work in progress. It is a collaboration. But when my system and I'm doing my work, it has the ability to command the nervous systems in the room. And if I'm dysregulated, which is kind of a fancy word, there's probably some dysregulation going on, and I need to do my work of coming back to being regulated. But I will say that a lot of people don't know that this is regulation. Being neutral, having no emotion is not being regulated.
What do you mean by regulated? Maybe some people don't understand that
Kind
term.
of like a ripple effect of like allowing something to go through.
Yeah.
Like that emotion, that grief, that sorrow, that blast, the I can't stand you needs somewhere to go. And so safety, grounded. I mean, there's lots of layers, so I don't want to go too far all over the
go as
place.
far as you
I
want,
do get really passionate about this stuff.
And that's what we want.
And so taking what I've learned, it was life-changing for me, but giving space to say, you know, how might something like this be regulating? Well, as I get really uncomfortable and I can feel the support of my leg, or I can, okay, I've got a back to support me. I've got a body. This is mine. I'm okay to connect with myself, but a lot of times we don't even feel safe to connect with ourselves. And so we're not really there. And so that's kind of more what I mean by being embodied of like, you can contain this. You have contained this. It's just more. We need a bigger container.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need other people to open up that container, and just some really cool things that can happen, or exercises. I think at some point that would be really fun to do if I could get it together. I could do an intensive week and we could learn
That's awesome.
what it means to just walk up to someone and say, oh, your shoulder's tired. Like, I'm just going to put my hand on your shoulder. Oh, your elbow's getting tired. Let me just come, like, and just being surrounded by this web of support and connection. It does wonders. Like it's, I can't see it all, but I can feel it. And I think just understanding how to process an emotion, which goes back to the regulation of like, that's a sigh is processing, just like, you know, Pastor Bill, like the heavy sigh of like letting stress out. That's regulation.
Yeah.
It's not the end of it when it's all over.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you do have such a passion for this, you know, and it is such a calling the Lord's placed on you. And why I like this is because I know I had mentioned when we started that I think more of the general population is being more aware of these things. I want to go even deeper and say that more of the church world is being aware of these things as well. The church world, and Tori and I discussed this a little bit, was a little afraid to use the word anxiety or any of that.
Yes. For the longest time.
Right?
In my chair, like in the congregation chair, just kind of be like, I don't know how to do that. Again, I don't know what means by which to do this, but I need people to know that this is a response and a biological response to something being detected as scary and overwhelming to your system, and how it can get misconstrued as we look at the Bible, and kind of trying to integrate that and saying, as I bring Jesus, like, I'm aware of the verses that say, you know, don't be anxious for nothing, but in everything. And that doesn't get dismissed, but it's also like, can we have a little bit more of a word study, or can we understand what he's given us, what he's provided internally in our brains? Like, we have three different, like a reptilian brain, like for instinct. This is for logic and reason, which develops for a long time until we're like in our young 20s, and then it's peaks, and then we kind of go from there. But it's developing. And so trying to create spaces for the teenagers that are, whoa. But nope, you can't just ask them, like, why can't I go? Like, you need to give them a reason. Generally, they should understand if you give a legitimate reason. And that's for teachers, parents, like just anything, but really, really, really understanding what do we need the most. And if anxiety shows up, if depression is showing up, if a trauma response is activated, we're looking at something that in the system is just detected, like it doesn't feel safe to be here. And so these are the things that I've been given that I can do. And if those don't work, then people pleasing is probably my last resort.
I would never have thought of that. I've heard of, and most people have fight or flight, like, oh, that makes sense. But I
Which
never
are the
thought of,
first ones that the
right.
brain wants to do because
Yeah.
they're mobility. You can move, you can say
Yeah,
stuff, you
okay.
can
And
kick,
that
you
can
can elbow,
change things
you
quickly.
can run. Freeze, you don't get to
Yeah.
move.
Huh.
So
That's really interesting.
yeah.
I think I may represent most people that don't have as deep of an understanding of these things as you do. But
I went to school.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's why we should lean on people like you. But when you say the word trauma,
Yeah.
is that sort of an umbrella term that all
It's-
these other things fall under?
It's absolutely a big
So what would
umbrella.
fall? So what falls under that? Is it too big of something to list, or like so anxiety,
No.
depression, those fall underneath the trauma umbrella, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so
They're both trauma responses.
okay,
I have had people come in and say like, oh, Lisa, I have anxiety, but I don't know what you mean by trauma.
exactly.
And in
Some
my head,
people
I'm
may not
thinking
understand
like,
that.
that's
It is.
2/3. Like that's half. That's half of the trauma
Yeah.
response. And you got trapped somewhere, you needed to run somewhere, and you didn't get to. So we're gonna help resolve that. And I know sometimes at the beginning, it's like you're gonna help me run to the place of safety. I'm sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I'm going to help you get to the hospital. I'm going to help you run so that abuser can't yank your hair back anymore. You're fat. Like, we're going to do it. And the body's going to follow what it's going to do. And as it has capacity to follow that, symptoms go away.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm assuming that every situation is unique. Everyone's situation is
Yes,
different,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm also assuming that everyone's timeline is different because of that as well, correct? So if I came to see you, it's not like after one session with you call them sessions, appointments, what's the word you use, whatever.
Interchange.
There we go.
sessions
If I
for-
come see you, it's not like I walk out, I'm healed, I'm done, right?
No.
It takes time, correct?
It does.
And it's different
It
for
does.
everyone.
Mhm.
So like some people may be discouraged because maybe they've tried therapy or counseling,
Yes.
but then they're like, I don't see any change.
Mm-hmm.
How would you speak to that, to people who would be like, oh, that's not going to work? I went to 2 appointments and I'm still, how would you respond to that?
That's a fair question. I do think of someone that came in and she was
It's
like,
like going to the
you're
gym
my
twice,
last
yeah.
resort, girl. Like, if you don't get it,
Yeah.
I'm out. I'm not doing
Yeah.
this anymore. I said, okay. Like,
Yeah.
here's my framework, and within minutes, it's kind of like, okay, we're looking at some post-traumatic stress here. And we talked about different dreams and just being like, oh, you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. And I think when that clicks, there's an alliance that shows up and says, yeah, we're going to talk through this. There are words, but sometimes there aren't. And here's what we're going to do when we don't have words. And each one is so unique. Sometimes it'll be, if you need to stand, you can stand. If you need me to sit in the corner, I'll sit in the corner. If this is not the right distance, let's find the right distance. Let's laugh a little bit. Let's notice how it fit. Just so much.
Yeah.
But within 2 tries, it's kind of hard to know the
Right.
nervous system. And really, most people are like, this is what I'm dealing with. And then it's like, yeah, okay, that's is there. But there's also these other pieces. And I like to think of it a little bit as like having a blank panoramic canvas for everyone that walks in. And it's mine. I've just got a blank one. And as they come in, like splatters and digital pixels
Yeah.
get thrown up on the canvas.
That's good.
And I just get to keep that canvas, and it just keeps getting to be painted as they come in each week and as they're motivated. And some come for a while and some take a break and they come back. And that's a journey in it of itself because I'm a helper. I want to support. I
Right.
want to see them get well.
Yeah.
But I know that they're not going to get it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
over a year, it's like, I've known you for 52 hours.
Yeah.
That's like a whole weekend,
Yeah.
but less
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
in a
But
year.
spread out, yeah.
Yeah. So It's a little bit different.
It's like, going on a diet or going to the gym for a month and you're like, this isn't working. I'm just going to go back to
Yeah.
the things I know that are not helping me,
Yeah.
Same thing with our mental health, I think. But Pastor Charity is in a similar,
Yep.
she studied, correct. What did she major in, or what was her title? Counseling, I believe.
She's
Is that
LP,
correct?
like LMHC as well.
Yeah. And I never get it right. Again, this is not my, this is
Sorry,
not my
Charity.
area. So,
Yeah.
but she, I bring her up because she uses a line that I love a lot. She likes to say that, God created science. And I love that she says that because since God created science, there are sometimes deeper things that cause people to go through trauma. And people like her or yourself, the Lord gives y'all the calling and the gifting to be able to, help people out with that. I know in the church world, a lot of times when there's a person dealing with any kind of trauma, they do the right thing and they ask for prayer. But sometimes that's the end of the support in a church world. And again, it's nothing against the church world. I'm a pastor. I fully encourage people, if you need hope or healing, find a church and go and ask for prayer. The Lord moves in prayer.
Community and presence is huge.
Yeah. How huge is that? Community and presence, like having support. And does it have to be like consistent? Is it as simple as someone just saying, I'm there for you, or is it pretty huge?
Well, I would say it's really, again, maybe it runs the gamut, but I remember turning around even just probably a couple of months ago, and I had just noticed someone had some really curly hair, and I was just like, I just really love your curly hair. I know it can be frustrating, but I just really like it today. And her mom was like, she was wondering if someone was going to notice, and it's just like being met. The idea of being seen. As humans, we're looking to be seen. We're looking to be felt. We're looking to be understood and heard. Like that's most of the senses.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, that's good.
And when I walk away from someone, like if I've had a prophetic word and someone said, I wore a pair of shoes that had like black, white, black, white, black, white. And so it was in a particular thing at church that we were doing back in Columbus, but it was like based on my shoe, they had a word, you're going to set captives free. This is like a prison, but you're going to set them free. And it's like, I remember that forever.
Yeah.
That was years ago,
That's
10, 12 years ago. And I'm like, I remember how that felt.
Yeah.
I remember to be seen in that, to be encouraged in that, because there are moments where it's like, I ain't helping nobody. How am I setting captives free? Like, ultimately, your job, but I've been called. Like, I've got to bring joy. I've got to be like, and so when you're met in those words, and those words wash over you, you don't forget them. And people need those.
Yeah.
We need those words to like fall over us, not just because I know that about you, or I know you need affirmation, or I know you need quality time, but because there's a download from God that says, I see you.
That's good. Yeah.
And I think most people can testify to a moment that they were seen in that, like going through a hard time, and it's just like, here's this for you. I don't know what it means, but here it is.
Yeah.
And as I get to listen to people, it's like, wow, so-and-so said this to me, and it just took me out in a good way.
The smallest things can really make the biggest impacts in people you just don't know, know. And as, Pentecostal Christians, we believe the Holy Spirit guides us. It's not by coincidence that you feel led to tell that person, I like your hair or whatever.
Right.
It's for a reason. And sometimes we don't even know what it is. Circling back to what we said earlier about, these random giftings or passions we have, it's all for a reason. The Lord, we can't see the future. We don't see, time as the Lord does. The Lord has this grand scheme, this grand plan that we don't understand sometimes, and nothing's really by coincidence. It's all, divine timing.
Right. And so, learning to hear the voice and the prompting of like, go do this.
Yeah. It can be kind of scary sometimes.
Oh, it can be really
when
scary.
You're prompted to do something that you really don't usually do or gravitate towards. But when you sense the prompt of the Holy Spirit, there's no mistaking it either. I can't explain into words what it's like, but there's no mistaking it.
No, and he gives affirmation
Of
when needed.
course. Yep.
And if you miss it, you circle back around again.
Yeah. The Lord,
Because someone will do it. Esther, if it's not you, like someone's still still coming through. But for such a time as this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
He is speaking all the time.
Yep.
So.
Always. And like I said, we serve a creative God, creative ways that he speaks, through people, through timing, through situations, he's creative,
Very. And there are, I do appreciate and love that in some of the other callings, I guess, that have also been in my life, have an opportunity to be utilized in counseling, moments where, okay, you have the word loser written over your head, and here's the color, but here's a word that he wants to exchange with you. Would you like to exchange words with him? And you just watch them shift. And it's like, whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
It can be different. And I think a lot of times we are convinced and we believe the lie that this is never going to be different. This is going to suck always.
I mean, the word says that, the enemy is called a deceiver. Satan, liar, deceiver, and he'll try everything to throw you off guard or to, discourage you from being on the path of the Lord,
Yeah. And I realize, at any given time to recognize that we are feeling potentially something, at all given times. We can be neutral and there's time that's I don't really have a feeling about anything. It's nothing's much going on.
Yeah.
But speaking to those places, discerning, again, maybe coming back to that, being a place of hope and healing, in my mind, requires that we're all operating in our gifts.
Yeah, that's good.
And so as we build those, as we encourage those, figure out what those are, which I know we have a opportunity to hey, get plugged in, know what those giftings are. If it's giving, give.
Yeah.
If it's serving, serve.
Yeah, that's good.
Lighting that passion and saying, man,
good.
we've got to go. We don't have a lot of time. That's how it feels to me.
That's good. I like that. That's awesome. We have a few minutes left here.
Yeah.
And when I first reached out to you and I was like, will you come do this? You agreed, but you were like, there's so much we can cover. Yeah. And today we didn't even scratch the surface, you know what I'm saying? And so we'll definitely, if you'll come back, you'll come back.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Absolutely.
We'll have you back and we'll probably dive into more specific topics. Today I just wanted to get people to get to know you a little bit, and then a little sneak peek into what you do. Sure. And then maybe next time we have you, we'll get a little more specific.
Kind of like the hide and peek, the books that have is that what that is about? Okay, I need her to talk about grief, or let's talk about anger. Exactly. Let's talk about sorrow. We can do all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. My hope is that a lot of people watch or listen to this, even if you're not a person that's experiencing trauma. I hope you watch and listen as well to gain an understanding of what those people go through, and maybe gain an understanding of how you can pray for those people, or pray for people like Lisa who have that calling of working with those people. We talked about it too, that more people are gaining understanding, and that's only helping, I think, the people that are experiencing trauma and living with it. And so I really hope that this educates people and teaches them more on what it's like. That
there is a way out. You don't have to stay stuck.
That it's deeper than just what we see. That there's always so much more behind the scenes, so to speak. And so I'm fascinated. You've opened my mind to a lot in just this short time. But we'll definitely have to have you back.
Awesome.
If that sounds good with you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Awesome. Well, Lisa,
I'll get better as we go. Yeah.
No, we're getting there. We're all getting better each day, each time. So
awesome.
Thanks for coming by and talking.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, you guys. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.